In an industry where most films never make it to the screen, and even fewer find their audience, today's conversation is about what it actually takes to bring a story to life and the cost of doing it right. I'm sitting down with producer Trevor Wall, a filmmaker who understands that behind every finished film is a series of impossible decisions, constant pressure, and a relentless belief in the story. His latest project, Slanted, isn't just another independent film. It's a case study in navigating the realities of modern filmmaking. Development struggles, creative compromise, representation, and the ever-present question of what success really means in today's market. This isn't just a conversation about one film. It's about the path, the setbacks, and the truth behind building a career in this industry. Trevor, I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
You've been able to achieve something that most independent filmmakers only dream of. You've walked a project from development through distribution, most importantly, theatrical distribution. You got people talking, and you made a buck.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It's really the distribution part, especially, which I know we'll get into later. That's the part that I feel the most grateful for, honestly.
What was the moment in your career where things actually shifted from trying to break in to feeling like you were in the industry?
Yeah, I would say, so my sort of path or entry point in was through an internship, which, we can definitely get into just the ethics of internships and the labor that they ask you to do for school credit compensation. But nonetheless, it was definitely my sort of like way to sort of, breaks through that sort of bubble, if you will, because, I didn't have parents that worked in the industry, so I didn't have the nepotism path or anything like that. And, an internship allowed me, which was at Overbrook Entertainment, Will Smith's company at the time. So it was also just a great opportunity for me to really be exposed to not only one of my sort of movie heroes, but also just Black Hollywood, and specifically wanted to sort of make stories for marginalized and underrepresented sort of voices and communities, and sort of having that be sort of the first entry point in for me. It was really really special, and I think from there I sort of was able to turn into an opportunity somewhere else to actually get paid and start working.
Looking back, what did you misunderstand about how careers are actually built in this business?
I think looking back specifically from like not working quote unquote or in the quote unquote industry compared to now, is I very much underestimated the role that agents and agencies play in all of this. I'm also an adjunct film professor, and I teach my students this because something that I wish I knew in film school is just the role that agencies play in terms of the overall sort of ecosystem that is Hollywood, in terms of the relationships with talent, the relationships with studios and financiers, and having them all kind of orchestrated and filtrated sort of through those offices and through those buildings. It's a whole other sort of side to it that when you're the sort of art and filmmaking aspect of it, I certainly wasn't really privy to, or really had a full comprehensive understanding of.
What could you give us an example?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think they kind of say as a producer, they are at the center of everything. So it's like, as a producer, if I'm trying to find a script, sure, I can find it through sort of writers or whatnot, but agencies also carry scripts where I could find material, and then if I wanted to find a director, also can do that independently, but typically agencies also are kind of, you go through them as well. And especially then if you want to, if you're able to do those first two things without an agency, typically if you're wanting to try to go to talent and cast and try to get, some recognizable name to try to help, lift the profile of your movie, and also, just the creative talent, they also, it all goes through reps and agencies, and everything, every deal, every contract that's sort of negotiated, even with some financiers, there's always a negotiating party in there basically, amongst the different parties. So it's something that they also just have a lot of access to different information. You hear about things, you hear who's looking to do what, and it's just a central hub. Like I said, I think in various sort of aspects of the sort of industry side of Hollywood.
What do you think separates people who sustain a career from those who only get one shot?
Oof. I would say it takes a lot of passionate persistence and uh, and honestly a little bit of luck too. It takes it also does sometimes take the stars aligning. I think especially even though I feel like I even go through this, excuse me, myself. Even despite successes that I've had, just as an independent producer, the next project, the next thing is not guaranteed. And also as an independent producer, career producer, I don't get paid until cameras start rolling, and that's a lot of time and energy investment into various projects that you're just doing work that you hope will get compensated for later, and I may not even. So having to sort of the story about balancing that with being able to just survive capitalism, and be able to just be able to actually just put food on the table and a roof over your head, an expensive roof over your head if you live in Los Angeles, like myself. And yeah, it could be really, really hard. It takes the passion persistence. I think for me also comes from needing to or wanting to do it so badly that it is that hustle that you're doing while you have to maybe do other side hustles to pay those bills. It's a grind. It's a hard life. There are a lot of times where I would just think about walking away from it all, because it just to make it have it be able to calm and relax and not feel like every morning you're waking up running on the hamster wheel. But yeah, it's that passion. I love this art form. It's something that I loved for a very, very long time, and it's something I don't really see myself doing purely as enjoyable or maybe even as good at. So it's something that I just have to. I tell people I'm a prisoner of my passion. Sometimes I feel imprisoned by the amount of passion I have for this, because it could be tough to maintain that career.
Now, speaking of that grind and those struggles, what do you say was the hardest part of getting Slanted made that people would never see from the outside?
I would say there's a lot of different approaches. I would say within production, it was a pretty low budget. I think a low budget can be sort of relative, and even me having this being under 5 million, even just having 1 million in general is obviously a significant amount and very grateful for. But with this specific movie, having to sort of navigate these heavy prosthetic makeup costs and wanting to sort of do sort of body horror things that do cost money, that we just weren't able to get everything that we wanted, and having to sort of make those sacrifices, and also on just a tight even shooting schedule as well, with shooting so many pages per day. It's a lot of challenges and struggles, but that's just also indie filmmaking, and that's kind of just the way it is, and then you're making sort of art, and making those sort of creative compromises that sometimes can turn out for the better, and that's the beauty of it. So
At any point in time, did you feel like, man, this might fall apart?
all the time, yeah. Yeah. That's I've been fortunate enough to produce 2 feature films, and yeah, both of them multiple times. Yeah, I think that's part of also indie filmmaking is there's always fires being put out. There's always things that you're having to sort of manage, and we don't have the luxury of throwing money at problems the way that larger sort of studio movies can. So yeah, no, there were definitely many multiple times, but yeah, it's just honestly it takes the problem solving, it takes the great collaboration and teamwork to be able to just find ways to make it work. So yeah.
Yeah. What were the speaking of not being able to throw money at things, what were the biggest compromises you had to make to actually get the film finished?
Mm. I would say, well, to get the film finished, there's aspects where you're sacrificing. Um, sacrificing, sort of having to shorten certain days, and not getting everything that you need. Like, we shot in Atlanta, so we had sort of tornado warnings that you have to sort of shut down, and that eats into our day. We've had people get COVID and having people need to sort of shut down or push or shift things around and not be able to kind of make everything that we wanted within our schedule. So it was definitely trying to get those things in production that was a challenge. And then creatively, there were definitely moments where we wish we had and wanted to, like I alluded to, get more sort of leaning in more into those sort of horror elements or sort of body horror elements that we didn't necessarily have the budget to, because it was having to do a number of different things in terms of all the different genres I feel like it's playing in, of a high school movie and filling out a high school, and like I said, the horror and the makeup and stuff like that is you do the best you can with what you have.
Hmm. Now, a lot of indie producers get caught up in trying to, put out. Well, you have to put out every fire, right? But they don't. But you get caught up in trying to fight every battle that is in front of you. How do you decide which battles are worth fighting and which ones you have to just let go?
It's definitely case by case. I feel like you also, and I think there are moments where you have to think, uh, uh, letting go of like the battle versus the larger, win of the war, in those ways. And the larger thing is, finishing the movie and sort of uh, uh, getting the movie done. And yeah, I think anything obviously result in the concerns of like safety and different things like that. Like that's obviously high priority. So like there are things that, are more priority than sort of other more sort of management sort of team sort of morale management things that you have to do as also a producer. Everything is kind of case by case, and it's hard to tell. It takes not only thinking of the bigger picture, but also just instinctually what as a producer you feel like I think makes the most sense in terms of needs the care and attention for the overall, I think, end result, which again is the movie, because I think that's the unifying goal with everyone, is we're all wanting to make a good movie, and across the board from top to bottom. So.
And speaking of everybody working towards the goal of making a great film, from your perspective, what do directors most often misunderstand about producers and working with producers?
Yeah, I would say I feel like the movie a movie is the director's story. Like I guess it is their medium, and it is their art form that they're creating. But I think even with a director, and this extends to, I think, a large misconception, but just producers as a whole, is we're also very much like the authors of this movie, in a way of just like it as a production existing. And it's, I always say like a movie could not exist full stop without the writer, because like there is like, that's the script and that is the story, and that's where it all literally begins. But from that, the director executing that script into a movie, but the producer actually being able to assemble all of the elements and the resources and manage the sort of production and the project to coming to fruition, and even beyond wrap, but also managing, the whole other life it has after production wraps. It's, we definitely share a good deal of just how much we sort of pour into this movie, even if it's not necessarily a direct representation, the way that it is the relationship between the director themselves and the film. So I think I think that would be it.
What does a director do very early on that makes you trust them, or conversely makes you worry about the project?
Interesting. It's my answer I think is kind of twofold, or not twofold, but it's uh uh they're in direct relation to each other, which is uh I'm always drawn to filmmakers, and I feel very in good hands with ones that are very decisive. Ones that like they know exactly what they want. They have a very clear vision, and that brings confidence. It brings reassurance. It's, as opposed to if you have a director that feels like they haven't fully decided or uncertain or unsure about various things, you're like, well, I'm coming to you because this is your vision, and it being sort of very specific that like and you have the confidence of your vision. But on the inverse, it can also be one where too locked into that and not sort of open to collaboration and outside collaboration, or even from either a producer or any other collaborators for that matter. That's can also be a bit of a concern in terms of just like having it sort of be so myopic, and it being so decided on what you want, that not sort of allowing space and openness for the collaboration process. So it's a weird kind of yin and yang in terms of like I'm drawn to ones that do know what they want, but also if you know what you want too much, maybe, and like not wanting to be open to collaboration, that could also be a slight hesitation or pause as well. So it's a interesting sort of balance.
So when a director's creative vision and the producer's practical reality of the resources and everything else, when that begins to clash,
Mm-hmm.
how do you resolve that without hurting the film?
Yeah, it's a good question. It can be challenging. I mean, I think the root of it is compromise, honestly, and some can see that as still as a net result hurting the film because it's not getting everything. But that's part of the transition from the script that you write and the movie that you make and that you shoot is those compromises with just the resources that we have. And I typically like to sort of navigate those conversations by coming to the filmmaker very openly and candidly, and also giving them options. So instead of sort of saying, hey, like, no, you can't have this thing that you want that costs X amount of money, I say, okay, if you really want this thing, that means we'll have to pull this amount of extras from sort of this scene in the high school, or like, this is sort of the cost, this is the trade-off, these are sort of the compromises, and you offer them sort of choices. You say that this is sort of, and then you offer, as a producer, you obviously, say what you think is the better sort of cost benefit analysis to have. But, walking the room sort of, instead of saying just a hard, like, hey, no, we can't do it. But I think sort of having that conversation, showing, where, it comes from and sort of the compromises that can come at play. I think that's usually been, I found a very helpful sort of approach to some of these conversations, other than just a hard no.
Can you think of a time where that conversation actually made the film better?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say not. The one that comes to mind, honestly, is not from Slanted. It would probably help if it was. But I'll just say a quick reference to the previous film, Pony Boy. There was a moment of our one of our antagonists sort of characters, their sort of first entrance into not just a location, but also like their entrance into the movie. And we wanted this kind of larger moment of them driving in and all these things, but with time and production constraints and needing to sort of like make last minute changes and adjustments and compromises, we had to sort of nix it to just them sort of walking in. And our DP had a really sort of great idea about making sort of even just their walk in very cinematic, of starting at their shoes, stepping on a cigarette, and kind of tilting up. And for me, the end result in terms of how it turned out in the final product of the movie, I actually like that sort of entrance more than how it was originally sort of scripted and envisioned. So it's like one where the sort of smaller scale, simplified sort of lower-fi, or not low-fi per se, but simplified version and execution of that moment in the script, I think actually turned out much better than what would have been in the script originally intended. So.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Pony Boy. So wrapping Pony Boy, or folding Pony Boy into the story with Slanted, when telling stories that involve underrepresented voices, how do you avoid it feeling performative?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as a producer, for me, the source of it for me personally is I grew up with a single mom that was just essentially like her living room was the Criterion closet. So like just collect a lot it's an old film, and I grew up I grew up watching like Turner Classic movies on stuff like that all the time. So I watched a lot of Hitchcock, Billy Wilder, Frank Capra. Those are sort of like the movies that my mom loved in the old sort of Hollywood era, and incredible movies. I really, really loved them, and they were the foundation for me having this passion to do what I do. But I got very frustrated looking back, feeling like I never saw any characters that looked like myself in those movies. And they really, I felt that sort of disconnect, and I longed for that. I longed for, even as I got older, seeing like Stanley Kubrick films or David Lynch films, and being like, those are so awesome, but I don't feel seen. I don't feel represented. And carrying that through sort of what I do now, it's been really meeting with and working with these like artists and filmmakers that have a very sort of strong voice and just a perspective and identity in their art that I believe in. So with both River, the Pony Boy, and Amy, it's, I think, not necessarily the performative ways, just from wanting to sort of invest in their authentic voices and their creative voices, that I being able to sort of make these films and these stories that I think are able to break down those representational barriers that I struggled with and didn't have growing up, and especially with Pony Boy specifically, of course, with the level of intersex representation and opportunities to have people see themselves in these stories. So it's impactful. Like it makes a difference. What we're making is tools and art that creates empathy, and it's and especially in this world right now, it's so valuable to be able to tell stories with characters that have audiences, identify and connect with characters that may not look like them, may not love the same way that they love, may not identify in the same gender that they do, or believe in the same religion or faith. It's those things that we still bond and connect over human emotions. We all know how it feels to have heartbreak or to feel scared. It's these characters and these stories. I think it's having those representations is so important, and also just bridging just empathy across just humanity. It's something that I really believe in, and kind of can get very hopeful and optimistic about it in sort of times like this that we're in.
Yeah. Have you seen a real change in the industry in how those stories are financed and supported?
I have. It's definitely, the tide is shifting. I mean, and not, there's both within our industry and beyond our industry. Of course, we're seeing the attacks on DEI programs and opportunities that would help support these things. And even just overall, there's definitely a shift in I'll say, type of stories that studios and companies are looking to make and invest in. I think that can often reflect the culture that we're in different ways. Sometimes it can reflect the culture in the opposite, in sort of an act of rebellion, and sometimes it can reflect the culture and just the culture as is, and what people feel collectively. It's it can be really, really challenging, especially as our industry becomes more prioritized and driven by corporate interests and making profits and things like that, and less for the art itself. It could be really, really, really challenging, especially right now, compared to, there has definitely been a shift from when I was interning for Will Smith.
Now, success can look different for a lot of different groups, right? Whether it's speaking to diversity, underrepresented voices, whether it's speaking to corporate interests, as you were speaking about before. But there's a lot of different definitions of what success is, right? What does success actually look like for a film like Slanted today?
I think for me, a success for me, even specifically with Slanted, I think that's why I was going back, or I said at the very top about the distribution aspect, is for me, uh, success on one level can just be um, creating art that gets seen. And that can, obviously can be done a lot of different ways, especially with the internet, things like that. But that's a significant sort of benchmark of success. And then I think on top of that, specifically, making it resonate with people. And like our Slanted is a movie that is divisive, and uh, 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 it's a movie that also does really connect with people that have experienced some of these feelings of a deep insecurity that they've had at one time, or struggling with self-love that can be a difficult conversation to have, or an uncomfortable topic to shed a light on. And I think for the people that has, it's been really impactful for them, and in those ways, I deem the movie as a success for being able to sort of have that impact and to resonate with people, because that's, I think, at the end of it, the art that we all want to create. We want to, have it resonate with people, and I think that's, for me, above box office, above awards. It's the impact, and wanting to just sort of have a sort of an emotional and resonating impact for people.
Do you think a lot of filmmakers today are a bit too focused on those outcomes, like awards and box office or whatever, instead of longevity and making something meaningful?
I think so. Like, yes and no. Like, I think there are definitely people that are really driven by awards and Oscars. Like, like we just saw. I think we all, as collectively, witnessed Timothy Chalamet like really really want that Oscar. And it's people are obviously driven by different things. But I also do think there are people like myself that are more driven by that cultural impact. Like, even for me as a producer, sure, like the box office success is wildly helpful for me to continue to do what I do. And obviously, it is a business. So as a producer, being kind of the hybrid that's in the middle of the business and the creative, box office earnings and success in those ways is a valuable success metric. But for me personally, in terms of just like why I do this, the work that I'm in it for, to where I can sort of lay on sort of my deathbed and sort of have something to leave behind in the form of art that lives on longer than me. It does come down to impact. Even though Get Out only won an Oscar for Jordan Peele for screenwriting, it has a profound cultural impact. Like, everyone knows what the Sunken Place is. It has those things. Or if you think about The Matrix in terms of like, it wasn't a huge sort of racking up a ton of Oscars, but the cultural impact on that is deeply deeply profound. Or even Jaws, if you go back even further, like movies that penetrate. I think that is, for me at least, that would be sort of the driving sort of goal and success. It's more around sort of the impact and the way it sort of resonates with people, more so than awards or box office and things like that.
And after going through this process, what do you understand now about filmmaking that you didn't before?
I think really understanding, for me at least, coming from film school and coming from sort of the creative side of things, is learning the business and the industry and the economics of it. Learning sort of how much these things cost to make, which I think is also can be a challenge in terms of this industry that we're in, and a lack of proper funding in support of the arts, specifically in this country versus other countries, and the type of art forms specifically that we're making being just one of the more expensive forms of art to make. Like, I would say beyond maybe architecture, and uh, other things. It's a lot more than just paint and a canvas. So it's I think for me, really learning a lot about sort of how much these things cost, and how it takes a whole team, and it's a huge feat. And seeing, for me, making movies and getting the opportunity to and getting that sort of glimpse on both the business and the creative is really kind of seeing just the economic numbers of putting a movie and a production together, and across from the movie itself and then it to sort of marketing and just the overall sort of process. I think that's been the most eye-opening for me.
And if you could give one piece of advice to filmmakers trying to build a real career, not just make one film, what would it be?
It's I mean, the main piece of advice is to just keep creating. I keep writing, and even if it's situations where you don't have money or resources, we all have like a camera in our pockets, like just having to be able to just create and share is the most important thing. That's what gets you from wanting and dreaming and then actually sort of doing, and is actually, I think, really doing the thing. And then beyond on the sort of advice on the sort of industry, I guess, side of things, I think it's important for filmmakers coming up, specifically in 2026, I think, to understand how I can only speak specifically to the Hollywood market and as opposed to other international markets. We're going through, as an industry, a contraction and a shrinkage. It's and largely also because, as a whole, I think movies and going to the movies, even they no longer carry the level of cultural significance in our 2026 culture the way it once did. It was disrupted, in the 50s when the television first came in, and in large ways, as I believe, it's going through another disruption with your phone. I mean, your phone is essentially a new form of a television set, and it's a new form of entertainment that movies also have to sort of share within sort of the level of cultural significance as a means of entertainment, as a means of people seeking entertainment. So with all of that, I'm also encouraging filmmakers to continue to make their films and write their films, but also expand and think about the core of what we're doing, which is just simply storytelling through moving pictures and sound. That's kind of to me at least, the root of what it is that we're doing. And as we go through this shift, sort of exploring and thinking of how are the different ways that you can do those things, outside of all boxes that follow a very specific path of making a feature movie that gets sold and goes into theaters. Like there's other ways. There's just so many other ways to do what it is that we're all wanting to do, which is just tell stories through moving pictures and sound.
I think what's clear from this conversation is that filmmaking isn't just about getting a project made. It's about navigating uncertainty, making hard decisions, and staying committed when the outcome is never guaranteed. Slanted is one example of that journey, but the lessons behind it apply to anyone trying to build something meaningful in this industry. Trevor, I really appreciate your time, your honesty, and your perspective. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. I really appreciate this.